Hi. My name is Koen Timmers. I'm a Belgian teacher, researcher, and author. And I've been launching several global educational projects during the past years. And I come to speak to you as a teacher. And I'd like to present about and focus on several learning approaches, striving for effective learning. And again, I come to speak as a teacher. And when Googling for education, icons about education, we are very often and frequently confronted with teachers in front of the classroom at a chalkboard and the human brain and getting a degree. And when I take a look at my time as a student, I think that formal education tended to be restricted to teachers pouring knowledge into their students' heads and memorization, assessment, and there's also very little interaction between students from different schools and even classrooms. And then we have the same picture as we used to have about creativity, which is a disturbing paradox that there's less creativity the longer students go to school. But there's also the soft skills. Offering education is more than offering knowledge. It's also about instilling empathy and fostering creativity and about presentation skills, being a team player, etc. And I really love this quote from Jean Lave, who states that teaching is neither necessary nor sufficient to produce learning. And I think that students can learn in very different ways, with or without a teacher. So students can learn by doing in so-called makerspaces, and in the UK, every student aged 10 gets a free microbit from the BBC, which allows them to learn how to code. And Microsoft has those hacking STEM kits priced €2, which allowed students to create robotic hands with straws and wires, being able to connect with the computer and Excel as well. And then there is collaborative learning. We have several approaches in collaborative learning, like the constructivist and connectivist approach, but basically students are learning by discussing, creating, constructing. We have students learning by reflecting, brainstorming, sharing in a group or in a network. And then there's flipped learning, in which students can learn from video tutorials in or outside the classroom, which is a great way to differentiate, because some students prefer to gain the maximum amount of knowledge and others prefer to rehearse. And I believe that we are shifting from a situation in which students are no longer the object of learning, but rather become the subject dominating their own learning processes. And two important things to mention is that there is no education. Education needs to be custom-made. My son is aged 7. He requires a different approach than students who are 18. And I think that different ages and topics and even schools have different needs and also require different approaches. And it's the teacher's role to decide which learning approach fits best to a specific situation. And we need to shift very frequently in a way in which teachers are instructors to a situation in which they become guides and mentors and pointing their students in the right direction. And then we have this. I think that most people are getting fed up with climate change and refugees and poverty and reading about those stuff in newspapers, while they know very little things about those subjects. So keeping this in the back of my mind, I decided to launch several global educational projects. And I once had, 3 years ago, I had a Skype call with Moses, who is a refugee in the Kakuma refugee camp. This camp houses 200,000 refugees in Kenya. They have 30 schools, and they have situations in which every classroom houses up to 175 or even 200 students. They have no power supply. And I promised Moses during that very Skype call to help him to increase the level of education in that camp by having Skype lessons with them. And I decided to send my own laptop to the camp. And thanks to crowdfunding, I was able to send 20 more devices. I also shipped a solar panel and internet infrastructure. And then I decided to create a global community. We are now 250 teachers across 55 countries offering free education to those refugees using that infrastructure. And it's not about this project basically, it's more about it was so hard to get my own laptop in that refugee camp, but it was so easy to find 250 educators willing to be involved in that project. And so I decided to set up a new project, and this time a pretty short project of 1 month. And the UN SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, proved to be a perfect framework because they are really universal, and these include the goals like no poverty and quality education and climate action. And in October last year, I launched the Climate Action Project involving 250 schools. And last month, we had the Innovation Project involving 515 schools across 85 countries. And I mainly found those educators using social media like Twitter, LinkedIn. We have lots of global communities like the Microsoft Expert Educator, Google Certified Educator. We have the National Geographic Certified Educators, etc. And educators are really willing to be involved and participate during those projects. And the scope of the projects is that we are focusing on one or a few SDGs during 4 weeks, and we have to think from the perspective of the student and not from the teacher. So the projects were student-centered and project-based, and the students, they had to do the work basically. They had to explore and brainstorm and discuss. They had to create, present, and share their findings on videos which were published on my website. This way, the students at first, in the first stage, they learn from each other in their own classroom, and then they evolve to a global experience because they began to learn from each other, their global peers, using those videos. In the first stage, using videos, and then we moved to synchronous learning by using Skype calls. And as you can imagine, students began to create and craft, but they also went on excursions, but they also invited their own parents to the classroom, so they were able to ask and request change at home. And some students were told they were journalists in the newsrooms using fancy devices, but other students didn't have any technology at all, and still they were able to collaborate in this project. Students began to create and compose songs and danced, and as research confirms, students are more engaged and confident and become more creative while creating their own knowledge. And this project also involved students from primary schools, secondary schools, even universities. And those students in India have special needs, and they are really very badly denied in their country. And they were really delighted that their video, which they created, was visited and watched by 100,000 people from around the world. And during that time, the Climate Action Project, the schools in Ireland had to close for the very first time in history due to hurricanes. Yes, he can confirm. And in this group, 2 students died in Sierra Leone due to the mud flows, which cynically offers the perfect angle to initiating this project about climate change. And what's better than learning about global issues directly from each other? They were able to share their story with students from around 85 different countries. The project was launched during and used during introduced during every subject as well, like science and math and even literature and history. And key was, of course, that like these students in New Zealand watching each other's videos. And this is a goal between Ireland and Denmark. And there are really lovely things you can do in a classroom, because these students connected with a traveler, a researcher, a scientist on the North Pole using Skype. And I invited some experts from Discovery Channel, and we have Céline Cousteau, who is the granddaughter of the famous Captain Cousteau, to share their expertise using Skype as well. And we use technology in a collaborative way, and I don't really like students learning about a computer. I prefer that teachers are using computers in every kind of topic or subject, like math and literature and science. And I'm really sure that students automatically and spontaneously begin to learn how to use computers using meaningful data. But also very interesting techniques were the green screen, which is priced 30 euros, which allows students to bring them in a new context or scenario. And the VR, this is a €2 VR cardboard. This is the low-end version, which allows them to bring them in new places and scenarios as well. And thanks to Lego and stop motion videos, we can allow our students to visualize their feelings and build new prototypes. And during the project, the teacher from the USA and Malawi, they had a Skype call with each other, and the teacher from Malawi was explaining how hard it is to grow plants and etc. and in their country. And so the students from the US, they found a way to grow plants using aquaponics with 90% less water. And last week, they were invited to the University of Oxford to share their findings. Students from Canada 3D printed coral reefs, and students in Nigeria created their own biomass plant. And some students used games like Minecraft to visualize deforestation. And in Ireland again, a teacher she strived for paperless classrooms, and she created digital textbooks using badges and certificates. And I'm doing the same in my classroom, and I allowed my students to participate in the textbook, the digital textbook. And what spontaneously happened is that they began to create their own notes and their own pages, and they began to develop their own curriculum and tutorials. And so we went and we evolved to a situation, and the students began to learn from each other, but also the teacher, me, I began to learn from my students. And I think that's still a taboo in education right now. You can use social media. Of course, we have the privacy issue, but I think that students are using Facebook and Twitter anyway. And I think we have to educate them how to use these properly. But also, tools like Twitter allow students to connect to experts, to discuss in closed, secure groups on Facebook, but also allow teachers to exchange their best practices and approaches and thoughts on messengers and other platforms. And also, very key, important, I think, is creating a professional learning network for a teacher, but also closing a gap between getting a degree and finding a job for a student, thanks to a personal learning network. And we very rarely take action in education. Those students in Peru, they went on a march, and students created prototypes, recycled, they did flash mobs, visited prime ministers. And it's not just a small project. It was supported by the Dalai Lama, people like Charlize Theron, policymakers, people from the OECD, Greenpeace, and it was covered by media across 35 different countries. And it's not about this project. It's not about how to create a global project. It's more about the techniques. It's more about how did we learn during this project. And indeed, teachers were driven outside their comfort zone. So how about the future of learning? We are already in this era. We already can control drones with our minds. This is me 1 month ago in Dubai. And we can already use facial recognition technology. And again, we have the privacy issue, but people are using this in China already, schools. Scanning the emotions of their students every 30 seconds. Already happening right now, okay? And this was announced 1 month ago. This is Google Duplex, and this allows a computer or your cell phone to order a pizza, or doing conversations. And I'm really sure that this is already able to replace call centers. And jobs will be lost. And I think we have to focus on very important skills. And one of the most important 21st century skills is, I believe, is creativity, but also collaboration and critical thinking. And jobs will disappear, and complex problem solving, critical thinking, and creativity will become key. And yet, we are using technology in a wrong way. Schools are deciding to buy 20 iPads, and then it's like, okay, how are we going to use them? So this model, the foreign balance model, helps policymakers and schools to decide how to use technology in their school. And also, I'm teaching in a different schools, also in a university college, and lots of my fellow lecturers are telling me like, okay, I'm going to use Prezi. What for, I don't know, but I'm going to use it because it's a really fancy tool. That's wrong, okay? This model, the TPEC model, explains how to use technology in your classroom for teachers. You always have to start from the content, the curriculum, and then the pedagogy, and then we have to decide which technology can be mapped to this content. And this is also a very important model, the SAMR model, which evaluates whether your use of technology in your classroom is only enhancing or even better transforming your students' learning processes. So what's next? I will create SDG innovation labs all over Africa with Dr. Jane Goodall. And we are creating our own new open source curriculum based on the SDGs in STEAM, science, technology, arts, engineering, and math. And I will start building those labs next month. So this will allow us to teach children in the very remote areas of Africa. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you very much. It was a very intensive session. I think that in the future we'll learn more about what the mysteries of learning have in store for us, for our children, or my children not, but my grandchildren, yes, for sure. And let's hope, this is not to say that let's pray, that things in the area of peace and justice and strong institutions will provide for a safe learning environment. Thank you very much.